Howdy do goody two shoes, guide sorcery speaking, and I done goofed. I did y'all dirty. Um, First of all, I want to clarify that I have been trying to film this video for the past 4 hours and my computer just is not cooperating. So there's that. With that out of the way, if I seem a little bit tired and maybe a little bit frustrated, that's why. But I felt it was super important that I got this video out. So essentially, earlier today, I recorded a video of me reacting to the Pokemon Masters music, which came with the latest update 2.8 question mark. And among those was the Magma Aqua Leaders theme for Maxie and Archie, respectively. And I was not when I reacted to it, you could tell I wasn't the biggest fan. To me, like, I liked Maxie's a little more than I liked Archie's at the time. To me, Max, neither of them really like stood out from the rest of the Masters soundtrack, and even like apart from each other, there wasn't a whole lot that really, uh, you know, really told me about who they were, and that was kind of where I left it at the time. After that, I stopped recording and I looked through the comments of what people thought about it. And you know what? I missed some stuff. I missed some pretty important stuff. So I kind of wanted to give this another fair shake with the research that I've done so far. To my credit, the reactions are meant to be done without a whole lot of context. That's the whole point of a reaction. It's we're meant to be seeing it for the first time. So that said, I really wanted to give this theme a fair shake because it does a lot of really cool stuff. Both Archie and Maxie's themes here do a lot of really interesting things, and I kind of wanted to go over this. I want to clarify first of all that I'll be going too much into music theory. Like, for I want to like there are a lot of Pokemon Masters tracks that I definitely want to go into from a very theoretical very theoretical stance because they're very interesting, like in terms of theory. Chantal's, battle theme is one of them, uh, and that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. If we're being perfectly, Agatha's is another one that I really want to go over from a like theoretical approach. But this one I kind of just want to go from a little bit of theory, a little bit of and I'm not all that well versed in it, but I wanted to approach this from an intertextual standpoint rather. Talk about how it draws from different Pokemon games. Different specific themes from the Pokemon games, which is really cool. Without further ado. Before we get started, let's go over Maxie's theme first. Maxie is, of course, the leader of Team Magma. For those of you who haven't played Gen 3, Gen 6, his goal is to use Groudon, the legendary Pokemon, to dry up the seas and essentially expand the landmass in order to create a more in order to create more foundation for industrialization to thrive and humanity essentially to expand. Very much looking to the future in a lot of ways. So that's who Maxie is, and this is his battle theme when you're battling him in Pokemon Masters. So here we go. For this first part, I'm gonna play this in segments, and I'll kind of talk about each segment. So let's start with this one. So right off the bat there, we have actually the Team Magma Encounter theme from Pokemon. I pulled up the Gen 3 version of this because it's easier to hear than the Gen 6 version. So yeah, essentially what Maxie's theme starts off with here is the Team Magma Encounter, except it's a little bit faster. It's meant to match the tempo of his battle theme, which takes up the meat of the song. And uh, this is one of the things that I missed in my earlier analysis, in my early reaction, I should say. It's not so much an analysis, more of a reaction, but um, was one of the things that I missed. And when I was doing my research for this, I looked up first if Maxie and Archie's encounter themes to see if it had anything to do with this. I found Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire's encounter theme for the both of them, and it's just their main battle theme, just a little bit slower, a little bit of a march tempo, more semi march tempo, I would say. But it's a good thing that I investigated. I almost stopped there. I investigated a little bit further, and lo and behold, Maxie's theme begins with the Team Magma encounter, which is pretty cool, all things considered. Um, we'll keep going. So right now we have the meat of the piece, which is of course Maxie's battle theme, and let's take a listen. And what we have here is actually like this is so this is actually really interesting because it's actually I consider it to be a fusion of every single battle theme that Archie, not Archie, sorry, Maxie. Good grief, Maxie. He doesn't look like a Maxie. Yeah, is it just me or just he just like he doesn't look like a Maxie, but whatever. I feel like it's a bit of a fusion of like it incorporates elements from all of his battle themes so far. So I want to take a listen first of all to his Ruby Sapphire Emerald battle theme from Gen 3. So like you'll notice something about Hoenn is they're very big on their trumpets. Lots of brass in all the Hoenn games. And then you had the horn underneath playing the counter melody, and you had of course the timpanis, which are also present in the Masters version. Well, that's not the Masters version. That's the Masters version. um, and then I kind of wanted to show the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire battle theme as well. Starts off very similarly to the Ruby Sapphire Emerald version. And then that happens. So you'll notice something about both the Ruby Sapphire Emerald and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire versions of this theme. They're both very heavy on the trumpet, right? And this one, interestingly enough, is not. Despite like the trumpet being kind of like Hoenn's essentially like one of the things that make Hoenn music so identifiable is the prevalence of the trumpet. But there isn't the melody is not played by a trumpet. It's not played by, and it's one of the most interesting. Also, well, I'll get to that in a second. But like the fact that I asked a few folks that knew that had a good ear, about what they thought this instrument might be. They said it could be a lead guitar with mixed in with some woodwinds. Obviously, it's synthesized. Like this whole thing, I would imagine, like is one big meaty file, of course. But like you know, it does that, right? And like instead of like the trumpet it's a little lower to the ground. I would say it's a little lower. It's a little bit of a lower sound, and what I think that accomplishes, honestly, like one thing that I wasn't really sure ever how to feel about the trumpets in Archie and Maxie's battle theme because like in Ruby Sapphire Emerald, the trumpet is like it's a high instrument, you know. It's like it's very high on this on the scale, whereas you know you had the horn doing the counter melody beneath it and the timpanis, and it's very bass heavy. There are a few there are a few staccato high notes played by I think some other brass instruments, but they're few and they're so few and far between that it always feels like the trumpet doing the melody is all on its own, honestly, as if it's like just one person trying to summon this big power from underneath. It actually it's actually a kind of a cool kind of a cool comparison to how Maxie and Archie actually operate. You know, they're just like one individual trying to take control of of a power that is much larger than them that they can never hope to actually control. And in a lot of ways, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire does something similar. Except for the fact that you know the trumpet this time isn't alone. It's got a few other instruments going with it, but it still feels like the so does the bass, you know, being so like heavy on the lower notes makes it again has that same effect, only this time it's expanded to like goodness knows what degree. It's also a lot heavier, of course, due to the fact like in terms like, due to the fact that it's got a lot more electric guitars. You know, it's definitely, you know, it's but it definitely achieves a very similar effect, right? But this one, due to the fact that the just by the way of the melody being used by a lower instrument, by an instrument that's lower and closer to that heavy bass, almost a part of it, honestly, it really emphasizes. Like I'm assuming, by the way, it's it's pretty obvious. Maxie and Archie are going to have Groudon and Kyogre respectively, on as their sync pair. So it means that these versions of Maxie and Archie have succeeded in taking control of Groudon and Kyogre. And whereas the incarnations of these characters in Ruby Sapphire Emerald and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire were not able to do so. They were able to awaken them, but could not possibly hope to control them, which is a really interesting thing because, like, you have a trumpet that is, you know, so far away from the big, you know, the rest of the instruments that are way beneath it, and you know, almost like it's alone in comparison to the chorus of lower voices there, in both Gen 3 and Gen 6 music. Whereas here, it's almost a part of that. It's almost a part of that big, you know, that big ensemble of you know, lower notes, which is really cool. And at first I wasn't actually going to go over the Ultra Sun Ultra Moon battle music because at first I didn't see any similarities that I could draw from. But ultimately, I think Ultra Sun Ultra Moon is actually like achieves a very similar effect to the Masters music. So here, um, first of all, it's very interesting that they don't go straight into the timpani. They go for some snares first. But now we've got some, like, lower. Honestly, like, the melody here isn't even the highest part. It's one of the lowest parts of the of the ensemble here, whereas literally like all the other a lot of the other instruments are like above it. Of course, that is Maxie and Archie at their most powerful, right? They have in their respective universes, they have actually like not only succeeded in controlling Groudon and Kyogre, but actually achieved their goal of respectively drying up the land and flooding the planet. So which is really interesting. Which makes me think like at the time I'm recording this, I have the event has not gone live yet. I'm very curious to see if these are similar incarnations of Maxie and Archie who have succeeded in drying up the earth or flooding the planet. And if that's the case, how that's meant to be reflected in the music, or if it's meant to be reflected in the music at all. I want to clarify, by the way, that any analysis that I give here, aside from the intertextuality, which is honestly for the most part pretty obvious, entirely hypothesis, entirely guesswork on my part. Just me trying to connect dots where maybe there might not be dots intended. That's how it is as an artist, right? Sometimes you do something that you didn't mean to do, or sometimes someone sees something in your work that you totally didn't mean to do. Um, but anyway, with that being said, we've gone over that quite a bit. At this point, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next part of Maxie's theme. Now, what we just went over is like is shared with Maxie and Archie because they do like share the battle theme. So at this point, Maxie's and Archie's themes diverge again, and we have something that okay, this part is the main part that I missed when I first reacted to this, and I can't stop beating myself up over it because I'm really mad at myself that I didn't notice this. So let's go back to Maxie's theme and let's listen to what they have to say. So what you just heard, and what should have been incredibly obvious to me, was the drought music, which here from in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, mainly Omega Ruby, I'm pretty sure, we hear it like this. So yeah, that's essentially a slowed down rendition of what we just heard. What we just heard, well, I suppose more accurately speaking, what we just heard was a sped up version of that, and with a little more tying more into the into the more musical elements of this, because ultimately Maxie and Archie's theme a lot more like musical than what we just heard. In Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, the drought theme is meant to be, um, isn't meant like, it's not meant to fit into the key, right? It fits into the key a little bit. You still hear, here's the fourth, here's the third, the bass there especially goes up from the fourth to the not the fourth, from the fourth to the fifth. I mean, not the third. Bleh. Can you tell? I've been trying to record this for a while. But it goes from the fourth to the fifth, and almost the 8-bit. I'd say 16-bit. I have no idea. Y'all can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But and you have the woodwinds like howling above all of it, and it's really meant to like really imitate or call to mind the feeling of the sun like beating down on you. There's a reason you hear those bits up above. A similar effect, kind of similar to the trumpets I was talking about, in that like they're almost twinkling, but not in a way that you would think of stars twinkling, right? It's twinkling very like slowly and deliberately. You hear like the drone of the winds and the drone of the winds mainly call to mind like kind of an arid, like an unchanging sort of like heat just bearing down on you. And the synth below it really imitates, well, not imitates, but calls to mind the idea of that, heat shimmer, right? Um, and what's interesting, like the drone of the synth in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire is not present here, but it is like recreated not by synth, but by timpanis. So here. The timpanis imitate the pitch of the synth, which is very it achieves a very different effect. Rather than calling to mind the air or the distortion of the air from the heat, the timpanis call to mind the earth, because ultimately the earth is probably one of the most solid things about it, and percussion, especially the timpanis, are meant to imitate the uh, you know solid, very solid things, and timpanis being some of the biggest percussion around, very much reminiscent of the earth. Of course, you still hear the twinkling, but this time it's more on its own. The strings this time are taking. They don't imitate the woodwinds exactly, but this time they're a bit lower. They're a bit on the middle of the scale there, and it serves not to. It tries to. If you picture not the heat not coming from the sun, but this time coming from below. Then it makes a little more sense, and that brings chills up your spine because that has to do, of course, with Groudon. That's not something that Maxie would have in his Gen 3 and Gen 6 incarnations, but this is something that obviously is going to be a big part of his identity in Pokemon Masters. The fact that he has managed to take control of Groudon here. Um, it's very interesting in my opinion, and of course it's a little bit faster because it has to match the tempo of their battle leitmotif. So let's rewind a bit. And there's a bit of dissonance there. I didn't notice like the extent of the dissonance there, but let's keep going. Now, to my knowledge, the melody there is original. At least I think it is. If it's not, like, you can let me know in the comments what you thought that melody might have been, or what it might have originated from in the games. But of course, you still hear the twinkling sound effect all above that. This time going at double speed. So really, like, amping up the power of Groudon. And another thing that I think that I think that this does really well is, especially going at double speed, going at a faster tempo. It not only like gives the idea of the drought bearing down in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Ruby Sapphire Emerald. When you hear that music, it's not only is it slow and deliberate, it's also there's also a lot of focus on the higher instruments, right? You hear like the woodwinds howling above everything. You hear the twinkling, and of course the synth doesn't serve to it serves as a lower bass instrument, but it also serves to imitate that shimmering heat, right? Here, the fact that the fact that you've moved what is essentially the strings that don't exactly recreate the winds, but it's a little bit lower now. Like there's a more now the piece is not the melody, but whatever. Oh my gosh, the segment is a little more grounded, and you think about it, the sun that happens as a result of the effects of Ruby or Omega Ruby, uh, you it happens all over Ho, and you don't have to see Groudon in order to feel its effects on the entire region. Here, Groudon is very much present. You can feel that because now there are those lower instruments. It's not just the sun, it's not just the sun bearing down on you. It's Groudon, but Groudon's far away. Here, Groudon is present. Groudon is very much the source of this drought, which I don't know. Again, entirely speculating if that was the intention, but that's the vibe that I'm getting from this, and it's a very interesting effect. All right, so let's keep going. I'm going to pause there, just because like something interesting happens here, and I think this is another original melody. This is something that I think quite a few of the tracks do, when they're some of the Masters tracks do. I think Red's theme does it. Bruno's theme does it a lot. Um, I particularly in like the Elite Four themes, right? In which it harkens back to the melody of the main, the main melody of the piece, but it's very similar contour, but the pitches are different. It's something that this composer does a lot, and this part is unique to Maxi, of course. So, and you still hear the twinkling noise to some extent, all still in double time. So, to my knowledge, that's an original melody, but it is interesting that it uses a similar tactic that we've seen in other pieces in the Masters soundtrack. Let's keep going. All right, so that is the final part of the loop there. From there, it loops back to the main melody, and this is an interesting thing that another thing that Masters does a lot. especially when it wants to emphasize the intensity of battle. It goes for the it first of all, it uses that rhythm, that exact rhythm, a lot. Bum 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 bum. So it uses that rhythm. It has the percussion and the instruments. Percussion is instrument. It has the percussion, and all of the other instruments are all like hitting those same beats all at once. They're all in. They're all in. I can't talk. They're I can't really say unison because I'm pretty sure they're not really in unison at that specific point, but they're all playing, they're all hitting that beat. It's all staccato. There's no legato. They don't hold out the note. And the intervals used there are minor second, minor third. So bum, bum, bum. That's a minor second. It's, meant to be it's meant to be it's meant to be a little bit dissonant when put next to each other, and then the minor third, of course, like calls to mind the minor triad, which is you know I guess the effect that they're trying to achieve here is like it almost like almost a way of returning home in a sense, but returning home in the sense that it's still very intense. It's still a battle, right? It's still, you know, things are flying around, razor leaves and flamethrowers and whatnot. But going from the minor second, which is a dissonant, very, very, very dissonant interval, to a minor third, which is not really as dissonant, but the fact that it calls to mind a minor triad indicates that like we're not out of the woods yet. We're just getting back in. We're just getting out of a really, really, really bad scrape, and we're gonna keep this fight coming. And it's something that they use a lot in the Masters soundtrack. So yeah, that was Maxie's theme. I've talked a lot more about it than I thought I would, but for the most part, I feel like I covered everything for Maxie's theme. And before I talk about Maxie's, what I thought about it, let's actually go to Archie's theme. Now, Archie's theme, in a lot of ways, is very, very similar, and you'll see what I mean. Starting with this first bit here, you'll remember that Maxie's theme started with Team Magma's encounter theme. So, logically speaking, Archie's theme would start with. I can't even. Okay, so that was, of course, the Team Aqua encounter, which I've pulled this up from Pokemon Sapphire, specifically because it's easier to hear in Gen 3 than it is in Gen 6. So that's pretty much all you need to hear, honestly. It's again, Archie's introduction is a slowed down version of that. And I think I find it a little bit interesting that they start both Maxie's and Archie's battle themes begin instead with the encounter themes for their teams rather than for themselves. So it's really a reflection of how they were not able to come this far without their teams, right? Team Magma and Team Aqua, like they ultimately, like, the grunts working on the ground are the big reason that they managed to get to this point in their journeys where they are actually able to control Groudon on Kyogre. Maybe it's something we'll see when we actually play the event. And then, of course, we go straight back into the meat of this. So, pretty much unchanged from Maxie's theme. There's literally, to my knowledge, there's no difference. If y'all hear something, please let me know in the comments. Um, Something I forgot to mention when I was discussing this, I talked about how I felt this was a combination of like all of their appearances so far. Maxie and Archie share a battle theme in every incarnation except for this one, and it's that same melody every time, and that same rhythm, that same pretty much same melody, but like different instrumentation, different tempos, and it changes depending on the technology available, and whatever the director feels is necessary for the game, or the composer feels is fitting for the game. And one thing that I did notice, like for example, trumpets are missing, but it has that it has that lower kind of middling instrument, right? That plays the melody, which I've discussed earlier. And one thing I forgot to talk about was the counter melody beneath it, which is played by the horn in this case. Now the horn, let me actually go back, was present in the Ruby Sapphire version of this theme. You hear it? It's below the trumpet there. But it was not present in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, where, well, it was not, I guess it may have been present, but it was very much overtaken by the electric guitar. So yeah, you hear the electric guitar is very, very much overpowering that. And then, to my knowledge, it's not even present here. I think it is. I think it is, but it's actually higher, so I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna count that. So it is very interesting that it chose to take the French horn route. Personally, I like the horn route, honestly. Um, but yeah, so like I said, it took the horns from the Ruby Sapphire. It took the the lower middling instrument, not the same instrument, of course, from Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon to achieve a bit of a different effect, to kind of uh, give the idea of what this incarnation of the character has achieved, as opposed to his Gen 3 and Gen 6 incarnations. Um, and it is very interesting how it takes from all of these all of these different versions of him. So anyway, let's continue on. So after the meat of the main melody, of course, in Maxie's theme, we had the drought from Ruby and Omega Ruby, where Groudon's power causes the sun's, causes essentially the intense sun all over the Hoenn region. So naturally, Kyogre, Kyogre being Archie's goal here. And by the way, I completely forgot to talk about Archie. So Archie, essentially the exact opposite of Maxie. He's the leader of Team Aqua. He wants to take control of the legendary Pokemon Kyogre to flood the sea, to flood the seas, flood the earth, and essentially restore life to what it was like at the beginning. Essentially restore it to the cradle of life before humankind even existed. Essentially similar to how like Maxie looks to the future. In contrast, Archie looks to the past. It's a really interesting dichotomy. And these two, of course, are rivals. In Emerald, especially, these two, Team Aqua and Team Magma, and by extension, Archie and Maxie, are always fighting. Just like Kyogre and Groudon had that climactic clash, both in the past and, in Emerald. So, with that being said, Groudon has the power to dry up the land, cause the heat of the sun to bear down upon Hoenn. So Kyogre, of course... Actually... All right, so this is interesting. Just like Groudon had the power, like in Maxie's theme, you heard the drought, the drought motif come on, and you heard you could hear the sun just bearing down on everything. Here, it's a little bit different. What we heard, of course, was the heavy rainfall music, and I'm gonna play a little bit of it here. And of course, of course, the instrumentation is a little bit different here, but you definitely hear, of course, you hear the you hear the rising and the falling of that one instrument. I think that was very synth, honestly. Yeah, that sounded very synth-like. But the pitter patter, you have the hear the pitter patter of the percussion and the bass. Instead of like the drone that we heard from the drought, we hear the uh, you hear it just like working with the percussion to go bada 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 bada. That just it's very percussive. It's very like it's hitting the ground. Like rain would do, especially heavy rain. um, and of course, the rise and fall of that instrument in the background is reminiscent of the waves that would be that you would see in a flood, right? Even even in a flood where in torrential rainfall where rain is like coming down like constantly, like the pitter patter and like the very percussive bass there. You still hear the rise and fall of waves. It's still like at a much slower speed than the rainfall is working with. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting contrast there, and of course that's very synthesized, but it is like reminiscent of, for example, you know, it, uh, it's a woodwind, right? And I think literally wood. It reminds me a little bit of a pan flute, but I could be wrong there. Kind of, if you think about like those the bamboo shoots that water can flow through sometimes. Um, that's what it kind of reminds me of, and I feel like that was definitely an intentional choice, an intentional instrument choice there, and of course the staccato like the staccato like really imitates the drip drip drop of rain. Really, let's take a listen to it again. Yeah, it really just alternates between very staccato like raindrops and more legato like the flowing of water sort of vibe here. And of course we hear that here in Archie's theme. Let's take another listen to it. In a moment. Now, interestingly enough, what we hear first is actually we hear an original melody first. We still hear we still hear the kind of torrential rainfall effect that is heard in that we just heard. The bass beneath that, but it's actually not it's not achieved by the bass this time. It's achieved by again a more middling note. So yeah, it's a very similar rhythm, but it's achieved with a much higher note there. Um, I would venture to guess that probably like again like whereas Archie had to actually where Maxie had to draw power from the earth. um, Essentially, I don't know. It seems like Maxie's theme seemed like he was lowering himself into the earth, whereas this one is more like rising it up. That makes sense considering considering their respective goals, right? Maxie's goal is to dry up the seas, therefore making more room for the earth. Essentially, I guess that means water level has to go down, and but with it, I suppose Maxie has to descend into the earth as well. Archie's goal is to raise the seas, and I suppose that means Kyogre has to come up with him. I don't know. Honestly, I never got this far in the video without my computer just being absolute trash. So honestly, at this point, I'm just winging it. Um, but it's a very interesting concept to think that this time around Archie has control over Kyogre. Archie is able to raise the seas, is able to call Kyogre up rather instead of Maxie having to I don't know. It's an it's an interesting dynamic. Let me know what you guys think. I can't really describe what I'm thinking of right now. I would imagine that it's not like Groudon is like causing the Earth to erupt, right? It's more like he's causing the seas to recede, and in doing so, like, allow the depths of the earth to be explored and those basins that the seas would normally cover. Therefore, it makes sense for Maxie's theme to be lower to the ground. Um, and I, I guess in a sense, again, like in a similar vein, Kyogre's whole deal and Archie's goal is to raise the seas, which is why it would be a little bit higher here. Um, and in a similar vein, um, in a similar, I don't know. Well, let's keep going, and maybe something will come to me. And of course, we have that little leitmotif, which plays twice, I believe. And I think I heard beneath it the strings are doing the the lull and the rise and fall that we've heard previously in the original Alpha Sapphire theme, which is again reminiscent of the waves, and you hear the little droplets of water. Um, it's very interesting. I guess like I don't really feel Kyogre's presence, honestly, with this one as much as I felt Groudon's presence in Maxie's. I can't really make an argument for why, rather than having, having the presence of, having the presence of the water, um, you know, having Kyogre's presence would change how we see the torrential rainfall with this music. Whereas with Groudon, I suppose I could make that argument. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you thought. What you thought you may have heard. Um, so one thing that I kind of want to go back a little bit. One thing that I do here, which is a very interesting in contrast with Maxie's theme. It started actually with the full drought theme going on in, whereas this one, heavy rainfall, actually is divided, and you hear the original melody. At least I think it's the original melody first. So wait. This makes sense because like from a nostalgic standpoint, from an intertextual standpoint, you actually want to establish that this is the heavy rain, and that's why you don't really want to utilize the right off the bat, because that's in the later part of the heavy rain, right? The torrential rainfall, the that very percussive uh, the percussive beats there are more important. But at the same time, it's interesting how this piece actually tries to continue making use of the melody, of the musicality of it, before going into the musicality of the heavy rainfall theme. And it's a very interesting contrast to Maxie. I can't really draw meaning from it. I just think that it's a it's an interesting tactic. Also, something I noticed, the rhythm and the intervals used are see, there's that there's that minor second, minor third, pattern again. But this time it goes bum 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 bum. Interestingly enough, the Master's soundtrack does use bum 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 a lot. You hear that you hear it in Lance's theme, I believe it was. But it's used so much throughout the course of the Master's soundtrack. And then it does the chromatic rise, of course. There it is. I do love the heavy rainfall music, by the way. That's really cool. That's really a really cool way to portray like the torrential rainfall that comes with Kyogre, and especially when you're not in Kyogre's presence. Um, and I guess the intensity of it like comes from the percussion. The fact that you are actually in the presence of Kyogre. You're not only in the presence of it, but you're probably fighting him. Honestly, fighting it. Well, let's keep going. So you heard that again. That was to my knowledge, that's exactly the same as Maxie's theme. That little bum 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 bum. So yeah, I've already talked about that at length. I want to go back real quick. This part right here. Now that's another thing that Masters Music likes to do. I hear it a lot in I think it was Bruno's theme that does that a lot. Bruno's themes, and bum 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 bum, in which it likes to play around with the tonic note, going to a major third below it, and then a minor third above it. And the effect that achieves is it really makes you like question whether or not it is actually the tonic note, and really like leave you lost in there, like leave you lost as to what is going on. You could be like it could be any key in the world, and it could which is this isn't it. Masters does that a lot. And I can't always pinpoint why they do it. I think it's just a favorite tactic of the composer. But here, I think it achieves an interesting effect in that, like, as opposed to the land, gravity's a thing. Gravity's still a thing with the ocean, of course. But when you're in the ocean, you're floating. You could be literally like you could be up, you could be down. You're not entirely sure. You don't have full control over where you're swimming. So that confusion as to what key you're in. Am I at the bottom of the octave? Am I in the middle of the octave? I don't really know, because this is just like, I know this to be the tonic chord, but also it's reflective of a major of the third of a major scale. So I think that's an interesting effect, but I could be reading too much into that, honestly. So of course, after that, you have the transition back into the main meat of the piece. Minor third. So yeah, those were Maxie and Archie's themes. I kind of want to talk. Let's talk about them both, because they're very similar, and in a lot of ways they reflect each other in very interesting ways. There are a lot of interesting changes that were made. A lot of the intertextuality across all of the pieces in Pokemon's history is very interesting. Has my opinion of them changed since since realizing all of this? Yes and no. Let me explain why. Um, I have a greater appreciation of the extent to which they really wanted to reflect what this version of Maxie and Archie have achieved, right? I appreciate the dedication to detail, right? Bringing back themes from like the Team Magma and Team Aqua's encounter theme, bringing back heavy rainfall and drought, and incorporating them so cleverly into their battle themes. And I really love how they did that. I think that's just so clever. I still feel like they're far too similar, in terms of instrumentation, and in terms of their feel and the chord progressions, and like outside of the themes they brought back, like the original melodies. Like again, they used the minor second, minor third, trick way too much. And then you hear a lot of the progressions that you hear in the usual Masters music. So when it stops being like calling back those themes, I feel like it loses a lot of who it is, and it goes back to just, oh, I'm just generic. I'm gonna be a generic Masters theme. I mean, don't get me wrong. Though, like the Masters soundtrack is fantastic, but there are so many things across all of their tracks, so many patterns that they reuse constantly, that really, a lot of people have complained that they're sick of them. And I personally am not sick of them. I just like now I kind of feel like I kind of feel like they make for a more like I'm so used to them by now that they don't make as much of an impact as they used to, and they kind of take away from the impact of this as well. The instruments being like very similar, the meat of the song, like the actual battle theme, is practically identical. Of course, you have the transition back to that meat, which is practically identical. The instrumentation, for the most part, is pretty much identical. Of course, the differences being in when they actually go through the drought and the rainfall portions of their pieces. Um, and the fact that I can compare them, like, here's the thing, like, I cannot help but compare this to the Elite Four themes. The composer did a phenomenal job of making each Elite Four theme sound unique and distinct, right? You have the electric guitars and drums of and hoo-ha's of Bruno versus the snares of like the taiko drums of Bruno versus the snares of Lance, and the trumpets. And he gets some guitar too, but he gets the lead guitar, and it's not a whole lot of it's not a whole lot of guitars underneath him. You get you get the piano and harp and chimes of wouldn't say harp, more the chimes of Lorelei for the ice typing. You really do a good job of making each Elite Four member feel unique just by the instrumentation alone, and then the melodies, while they do draw from some of the patterns that we've seen throughout the Masters music, they're still unique, and they still do a great job of reflecting who these characters are. Lorelei, like, all those fourths really make her seem like a very graceful sort of very elegant sort of battler. And then in Lance's theme, you get callbacks to Gold and Silver. Um, uh, Agatha's theme just covered in tritones, right? Um, it does such a good job of, like, you know making each other distinct. For this one, not only is the instrumentation for the most part almost identical, I also feel like whenever they do divert from from, like, they throw so many of the game's themes at you, and it's so good to have all these callbacks. And again, the soundtrack puts so much love into the like, it's a love letter to the soundtracks of the Pokemon series in general. But when it tries to do its own thing, I feel like they're too similar, not just to each other, but to so many different tracks in the Masters soundtrack, that it just takes away from the power of it. Uh, all in all, however, I do really, really, really enjoy these pieces. I have my gripes, of course. I've griped about it a lot, but, like, going into it in depth like this has really, it's really opened my eyes to, like, not just what they did, but how they attempted to achieve it. And I want to stress again that, like, a lot of this is entirely entirely speculation. I could be very, like, my interpretation could be very, very, very different from the artist's interpretation. Maybe they just thought it sounded good, which is entirely fair. So that is my analysis of Maxie and Archie's battle theme here in Pokemon Masters. Once again, shout out to Absolutely PM for the data mine. And yeah, I can't wait to play this event. I can't wait to, honestly, as much as I've griped about their battle theme, I definitely, like, it's definitely something that I want to listen to on my spare time. I listen to so much Pokemon Masters music on my spare time. So let me know in the comments what you thought about these. Did I miss anything? Is there, like, a specific specific technique that they used, or maybe a melody that was taken from the original games that may have been present here? I've heard talk that some of Archie's themes, especially near the end there, were taken from Ruins of Alph, but or not Ruins of Alph, but Seal Chamber, but I didn't really hear it, honestly. So I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments, and leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already, to get to be notified when my content goes live, and hit that bell icon to actually get notified when my content goes live. Also, please consider following me on Twitch if you aren't already, where I do most of my charity live streams, and that's mainly where I am on the internet if you can't find me. Otherwise, goody two shoes, thank you so much for watching. I hope to do more of these in the future. I hope to really do a deep dive into the analyses of the Pokemon Master soundtrack, because it's so good and does such a good job at just calling back to other pieces throughout Pokemon's history. It's nearly 1 a.m. I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you next time. Smell you later.